What's up, people? It's Chris Gonzalez back again for another Tuesday and another episode for Trade Talk Tuesdays. And in this episode, I'm going to be recapping and giving my thoughts on Absolute Green Lantern Volume 1, Without Fear. And the writer is Al Ewing, artist is Jahnoy Lindsay, letterer is Luca Gattoni. And yeah, so I'm going to read the excerpt on the back of the book. So, on an alternate version of Earth, a powerful alien descends on a small town in Nevada. Terror reigns as he enacts his judgment on the residents of Evergreen. Among them, ordinary citizens Guy Gardner, Hal Jordan, John Stewart, and Joe Mullen. When fighting back carries an unimaginable cost, who will conquer their fear and emerge as a hero? So yeah, again, this is the fifth of the Absolute titles that I have read. I have read each of the Volume 1 trade paperbacks for Absolute Batman, Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Superman, and Absolute Martian Manhunter. And you can check out the episode of Trade Talk Tuesdays where I discuss Absolute Martian Manhunter, one of my favorites of the Absolute line. And yeah, so with this title, Absolute Green Lantern, I had read issue 1 when it first came out, and I didn't read the rest of the issues because I wanted to wait for the trade paperback. And now that I have it, let's go over it. So issue 1, it starts with Hal Jordan, and he is, walking along this road. Cops pull him over, and the cops like, "Hey, what are you doing out here? What do you got in your pocket? Hands up." And Hal Jordan, he's very anxious. He's trying to warn the cop of, just pretty much to let him be. And cop gets frustrated, and he keeps telling him, "Pull out your hand," and something happens. So what happens? Cop ends up dead. So we start off with what's going on with Hal Jordan. Again, it's an alternate version of Hal Jordan, not the one that we know in Mainline. So it then cuts to this diner, and then there's a broadcast on the TV where, something's gone down in a nearby town of Evergreen in Nevada. And then Hal Jordan, he comes in. He's giving off a weird vibe, and the hostess and the waitress at this cafe, he asks him, if he's okay, and Hal Jordan says no, something has happened. And then that's when the broadcast on the TV comes up, and this is what happens. This giant green lantern symbol has crash landed on top of this town, and it has ties with Hal Jordan. And then the patrons at this cafe, again, they get a sense that Hal Jordan, he is linked with what's happening. And so they question him, and then it flashbacks to a few days prior. Hal Jordan, John Stewart, and Joe Mullen, they're all friends. And, these bikers, they roll into town. And again, they're just having conversations. Joe Mullen apparently has broken up with her girlfriend, and they're talking about it. And all of a sudden, the bikers who came into town, they just run into this force field. One complete view. I'm not sure if it's... one of them completely gets destroyed by this force field. So they go check it out. They check this force field out. And then, they're just looking, and they see the Green Lantern symbols up in the skies. They're not sure what's going on. And then all of a sudden, this alien shows up, and this is the absolute version of Abin Sur. And in the main line, Abin Sur is the Green Lantern who, passed down his Green Lantern ring to Hal Jordan. But in this version, he is an alien, and they don't know, why he's come. So then it goes back to the present, and the people at the cafe, they keep questioning Hal Jordan. They're like, what happened? What's going on? What does it mean? And again, now they're starting, again, all this time, Hal Jordan, he's keeping his hand in his pocket, and now they're questioning, like, hey, pull your hand out of your pocket. And then all of a sudden, they pull it out, and his hand is like completely engulfed in this black alien material. And he has been trying to control it, and he loses control. And this black hand kills it. And it completely destroys the cafe. And I thought this first issue was pretty intriguing, and I was, by the end of it, I was, curious to see how the story would continue. And then by the end of it, Joel Mullen appears at the cafe, and she is engrossed by this green aura, and she's questioning Hal, like, what happened to you, Hal? So that was the end of issue 1. And we get into issue 2, and it starts with this, this voice is, calling out to Joel Mullen, and it's telling her to be without fear. So this series, to be honest, out of all the absolute titles, I think it's my least favorite. Not to say that it's bad or anything, it's just Al Ewing, he, with his interpretation of the Green Lantern lore and, the emotional spectrum, it's kind of cerebral. I personally, after the first read through, I had a hard time following what was really going on, but it's still intriguing. I still think it's intriguing, but out of all of the absolute titles, again, this is my least favorite. But and anyway, issue 2, Joel Mullen, she confronts Hal. She's questioning him about what happened to him, what happened back in Evergreen. They don't seem to know what's going on. And then again, it flashes back to Abin Sur. And now they're within the force field. The force field engulfs this town that they're in. And this is the absolute version of Guy Gardner. He's a cop. He's bald. And then he confronts Abin Sur. And then Abin Sur, he says, judgment will now commence. So he does something to Guy Gardner. And it is assumed that he kills Guy Gardner. So the citizens, they don't know what's going on. But yeah, I do like the artwork. The coloring in this is really cool. So Abin Sur, it seems like he has killed Guy Gardner, and John, Hal, and Joe, they can't believe it. And then the cops, they start attacking Abin Sur. And yeah, and then Hal, he, confronts Abin Sur. He tries to shoot at him. But John, he stops Hal Jordan, to not be so hasty. And then all of a sudden, Al-Mansur, he just vanishes. So, and then goes back to the present again. Joe and Hal are having this conversation. And the Black Hands is again giving Hal all these negative thoughts, and it's slowly taking over his mind, and he can't control it. So that was the end of issue 2. And then in issue 3, John, Joe, and Hal, they're trying to figure out how to, get out of this force field. And then John does some investigative work about certain materials that can go through the force field, and he figures out that, like, the gold metal, he throws it through the force field, and he's able to, it goes through. So the third issue focuses on John. Again, this voice is calling out to John. And again, it says, "Be without fear." But again, this issue is just John testing out which materials will go through this force field. And he figures out it's gold is one of the materials. And so, yeah, he tests it and throws it, goes through. And then it flashes back to the present where, again, Joe is trying to get through to Hal about what he's going through with his Black Hand, and Hal's telling him that the Black Hand is hungry, it's for the lights, it's angry with it, both, and he's pleading with Joe, "Can you turn it off?" And Joe's like, "I don't know." And then then Hal, the Black Hand takes over Hal, and it starts attacking her. So this was a cool action sequence. Again, I'm loving the coloring by Jahnoy Lindsay. And then, Joe is pleading with Hal that, you need to control it. And then, they get into this fight. Joe is reluctantly fighting with Hal because, again, Hal is her friends. And again, it flashes back. They're still testing out the materials and what can go through the force field. And yeah, again, it's still interesting. It's very interesting. There's like a mystery going on of like why this alien has showed up in this town. And then as John was starting to figure out, how to get through the barrier, Al-Mansur returns and confronts John Stewart, and again he does pass his judgment, and he does the same thing that he did to Guy Gardner, and they think that they killed John. And then the owner of a nearby cafe, dubbed Alan Scott's Cafe, I think, so I thought that was a cool Easter egg for the original Green Lantern. He attacks Al-Mansur, and then after that, Al-Mansur again vanishes. And then we get into issue 4, and then the voice is now calling to Hal Jordan, and it's saying that judgment has been made, but penance can be penance, and it goes into the Black Stars. And then now Hal Jordan, the Black Hand is completely taken over, and he's continuing to fight Joe Mullen in the desert. And I felt like this is a very anime inspired. The artwork has got an anime style, so I appreciated that. And then again, the hand, look at that. The Black Hand completely takes over Hal, and it's kind of like a version of Parallax, but different. And I just like the design from Jahnoy Lindsay of this. Very creepy, with the red eyes all over. And then we go back. Then Sur eventually confronts Joe, and because Joe Mullen pretty much calls him out, and she wants to talk to him, and then they have this conversation that, and he's just explaining to her what his purpose is there, and he's just telling her that her friends, Jon Stewart and Guy Gardner, they're not really dead, and she keeps questioning him, and this is what he says. So, Joe, she questions him. She's like, they're alive, and Sur, he's like, they're taken apart, broken into constituent molecules, strong implication of end state. That's, again, Joe Mullen thought that he disintegrated them, and he explains, the definition of disintegrate, and he tells her that Guy Gardner, Jon Stewart, and all the other citizens have not ended, but they existed in Oa. They are within the Omega Alpha, and they are in the second stage, and judgment remains in progress. And Joe has no idea what he means, and she's still questioning him. She's like, what do you mean? And then again, it goes back to the present with Hal and Joe. They're fighting, and this is such a cool image. So Joe Mullen, she gets imbued with Sur's power, and she's considered an anomaly now. See, anomaly. Sur doesn't know how Joe did it, so. And then afterwards, the giant Green Lantern lifts up and goes into the sky. Another cool image. So, and then this version of Hector Hammond shows up on the scene, and they're investigating what's happening. And I like how they mention Lazarus, so make callbacks to Absolute Superman. So I like how they're implementing some of those connections with the other Absolute titles. And again, issue 5 kicks off with Hector Hammond's team investigating what happened at the cafe that Hal Jordan was at in the beginning of issue 1. And he starts to question them. And then again, it's back to the past where Hal Jordan, he tries to kill Sur with this gold covered bullets. And after he does that, he kills Sur, and then this black goo starts to come out of Sur. And then this is like a really creepy image. Sur, he grabs Hal Jordan's hand, and that's how he gets the black hands, because Hal Jordan reacted in fear. And what I got from this is Sur is the way he's judging these citizens. He's seeing what emotions are, how they react to certain situations. And since Hal Jordan, he reacted in fear and tried to kill Sur, that's why he was given the black hand. But the others, like Jon Stewart and Guy Gardner, they didn't react in fear. So they passed that initial test. So, but again, it goes back to the fight between Joe and Hal, and then meanwhile, while that's happening, Hector Hammond, he's questioning this dude named Todd who survived that initial explosion from the cafe in issue 1. And meanwhile, it's a really cool fight. Again, very anime-esque between Joe and Hal. And Hal is, again, getting completely taken over by the Black Hands. So yeah, and eventually, the last issue was pretty weird. So again, I enjoyed the artwork, really cool. And the end of issue 5, Hal and Joe fly into the giant Green Lantern, and they get transported to this other realm, pretty much, where John is. So this is where the part where it kind of confused me. It's just they're transferred, but in issue 5 it starts with this. I'm not sure if she's in the CIA, but she's an agent. I think she's a CIA agent, and she's being questioned, and she's been taken off the Evergreen case because she has personal ties with Evergreen. And you don't know who this woman is, but you find out later. So, and then it goes back into, and this is this interpretation of the emotional spectrum, and John Stewart explains all this to Joe, and how the purpose of Abensur, of him arriving to Earth. And so yeah, it's just very, very sci-fi elements in this, and it was a little bit confusing to me, I'm not gonna lie. It was a bit confusing. So they're having this philosophical discussion, and then Mogo, and mainline Mogo's the Green Lantern, who's an actual planet. So yeah, not gonna lie, this kind of lost me. So Jo Mullein, she helps out Hal, and she takes his hand, and she pretty much cures him. And meanwhile, Hammond, they've been observing and gathering data for all that's been going on, and again, he wants to use it for nefarious reasons. So eventually, Joe and Hal, they fly out of their Green Lantern. Yeah, they fly out, and they go off, and Hammond is ordering his men to track him, and they're on a trajectory to Coast City. Now, what's in Coast City? We're soon to find out, but it's cool that we're introduced to the absolute version of Simon Baz, and he's having a conversation with that CIA agent from earlier, and I guess they were partners at one point. Her name is Chase Cameron, is this female agent. It's her, and then it is revealed that she and Joe were dating, and Joe took Hal to her place because she didn't have anywhere else to go. So that was the end of this trade. And again, interesting concepts. Again, I thought this was an interesting read. There's a lot of interesting concepts that Al Ewing was tried to, interpret with his interpretation of the emotional spectrum. And so I thought some of it was fascinating, and I did get lost with some of it. So I will continue, and I'll get the second trade. So, but it is very, again, it is my least favorite out of all the Absolute lines. but I thought it was an interesting read. The artwork was pretty cool, very anime influence, got those anime vibes, and the action sequences were drawn really well. The coloring also complemented the art really well. So yeah, if you're a fan of Green Lantern and all the Green Lantern lore, you probably really dig it. But if you're not that familiar with the Green Lantern lore, I'm not sure if this will be for you. So just take that into consideration. And also, I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the video. So Absolute Green Lantern Volume 1 Without Fear, it collects issues 1 through 6. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching this video. Next week, the next book I'm going to be going over is from Image, and it's Lost Fantasy Volume 1, and it's written by Curt Pires. Sorry if I mispronounced that. The art's by Luca Casalanguida. Colorist is Mark Dale, and the letterer is Micah Myers. So I will be going over this trade next week, so be on the lookout. And so yeah, again, thank you again for watching this video. Like, comment if you read Absolute Green Lantern, and let me know your thoughts on it in the comments. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And yeah, that has been another episode of Trade Talk Tuesdays. And yeah, stay tuned for my Wednesday video when I get my haul for a new comic book day. So anyway, that's been it. Peace out.